This video was brought to you by the TLDR socials. Get more from us by following us on Instagram and Twitter for bonus updates and explainers which never make it to YouTube. After months of discussions, debates and speculation, it finally happened. On Sunday, Germany went to the polls to elect a new parliament and, more importantly, a new Chancellor. With Merkel bowing out after 16 years at the helm, all eyes are on who will succeed her. So let's take a look at the results and the next steps right now. To cut to the long and short of it, the German political arena is fragmented. In fact, according to the effective number of parties measure, this election has had the most voter fragmentation since 1949. The SPD, who ended up being the winning party, did so with the lowest vote share in a national election ever. The SPD, led by Olaf Scholz, overtook the long-reigning Christian Democrats to come first with just 25.7% of the vote, just 1.6% ahead of the Christian Democrats. This is actually less of a lead than was predicted in the polls, with Politico's Poll of Polls tracker, for example, giving the SPD a 3-point lead the day before the election. But it was still a resounding success for the SPD, who haven't won a German federal election since 2002, and who, in July, were polling at just 15%, well behind both the Greens and the Christian Democrats. So, what happened to grant Scholz's SPD such a sudden victory? Well, perhaps the biggest factor in the SPD's success was the fact that a lot of older ex-Merkel voters moved away from the Christian Democrats to the SPD. It's estimated that some 1.4 million voters, or about 3% of the 47 million strong electorate in this election, swung from the Christian Democrats to the SPD, and this seems to be mostly in the over 60s, with whom the SPD saw a massive 9-point swing. Interestingly, despite increasing their vote share by 5% overall compared to the last election, the SPD actually lost younger voters, with a 5-point swing away amongst 18 to 24-year-olds and a 2-point swing with 25 to 34-year-olds. Nonetheless, this was a pretty good night for Olaf Scholz's SPD. Despite doing slightly better in polls than predicted, this was a pretty terrible night for the Christian Democrats, and especially Armin Laschet, Merkel's successor. Before Laschet, the Christian Democrats had a 20-point lead on their closest rivals, reliably polling above 35%. Laschet had a difficult campaign. He didn't have great approval ratings to begin with, and then he's made a series of gaffes since, including joking around during a visit to a flood-stricken town in July. Nonetheless, even though everyone knew it was coming, this was still an unequivocally poor result. The Christian Democrats won just 24% of the vote, 9% less than in 2017, and their worst result since German reunification in 1990. Perhaps most worryingly for Laschet, though, the Christian Democrats mostly held their vote in Bavaria, where they're represented by Markus Söder's CSU, who's been challenging Laschet for the CDU-CSU leadership. Elsewhere, though, especially in the north and west of Germany, the CDU lost out heavily to the SPD. The Greens had a relatively good night. They increased their vote share from 9% in 2017 to 15% this time round, making this their best result ever. But they'll still be annoyed that they didn't do at least a bit better. As we talked about in some of our other German election videos, in April the Greens were polling 25%, with a 3-point lead over the Christian Democrats. Now, a Green plurality would have been a real shock, but they might be annoyed that they didn't hold on to it at least a bit better. Nonetheless, this is their best result ever, and it establishes the Greens as a proper force in German politics, so all around, a pretty good result. To do this, they took some vote share from the Left Party, who won just 4.9% of the vote, a 4% drop since 2017. The left actually only gained representation in the Bundestag because they won 3 constituency seats. Otherwise, they would have fallen below the 5% second vote threshold for party list seats. The last party we'll talk about is the AfD. The AfD are a far-right German nationalist party, which all other mainstream parties have ruled out of any coalition. Nationally, their vote share fell off significantly, from 12.6% in 2017 to 10.3% this time around. However, they do seem to have concentrated their vote in eastern Germany, and especially in Saxony, where they won 12 out of the 16 available constituency seats. Although it's worth noting that their vote was nonetheless decreased in the region when compared to 2017. The AfD also did well in Thuringia, where they increased their vote share by about 2%, winning 4 out of the 8 constituencies. Anyway, enough about the individual parties. What happens now? While the new Bundestag will meet on Tuesday, it will be a long time before a new government and Chancellor takes up their roles. With no clear winner of this election, both the SPD and CDU-CSU have come out fighting, pledging to do whatever it takes to gain or retain the Chancellory. In turn, whatever happens next rests primarily at the feet of the Greens and the FPD. Both the SPD and the Union will be courting the two, with it likely being a matter of who's prepared to sacrifice the most, both when it comes to the main parties and each other. The Greens and the FPD have clear and opposing preferences. The Greens favour the SPD, and the FPD favour the Union, and specifically wish to see Laschet as Chancellor. In the meantime, though, Angela Merkel will remain Chancellor in a caretaker capacity until and unless a new Chancellor is voted in. Coalition negotiations could take a matter of days, or alternatively, a matter of months. Both main candidates for the Chancellery have said their aim is to have a government installed by Christmas, something seen by some as optimistic at best. We're currently working on a full video on coalition talks and what happens next, and that will be released in the next couple of days. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon for updates. Also, follow us across Instagram and Twitter for moment-by-moment updates. As always, a special thank you to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that is in the description.